Okay. So, given the fact that we're approaching 5 past, and I appreciate it's one of those topics where it's going to invite some questions and some queries, I'd just like to get started if everyone's ready.
Indeed.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for joining the Right Away webinar that we're hosting today. The idea is to be able to give you some guidance, advice and information so you can leave better prepared to educate and share the information with your drivers to help us start making the right culture changes. So in terms of how the afternoon is formatted, the agenda we are working to will be myself to provide some bit of a brief introduction as to our speakers and myself and a little bit more about the business. My colleague Damien Keys will be providing a bit of an update and an overview of the changes that were brought in around the end of January. Following Damien's section, Paul will then be taking over to provide you with an update on the changes that were brought in approximately 12 days ago, mainly related to the mobile devices and usage. During the session, if you do have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to use the chat functionality. What we'll be doing is mopping up all of the questions and we'll go through them with a dedicated section. And then finally, I'll be closing the session down to give you a bit more information about Cardinus, but also expanding just to let you know about some of the resources we're going to be sharing following this session being delivered. So, in terms of the individuals that will be speaking, obviously myself here, my name is Aden Deubert. I'm the Fleet Risk Development Manager here at Cardinus Risk Management. I've been with the business over 10 years. My role is quite a varied one. I support new and existing clients with regards to introducing appropriate training solutions to mitigate the risk reduction sort of measures that they want to apply. After me, we've got Damien Keys. To give you a bit of background to Damien, he's a very unique individual and ideally placed to give you some guidance on some of the areas he'll be touching on. Damien's got over 22 years of experience within the driving industry, and he's worked at Cardinus longer than I have. Damien is a driving standard agency approved driving instructor. He's a member of the Institute of Advanced Motorists, ROSPA, NDORS. He's even a Commonwealth medal winner for cycling as well, and even undertaken the ride across America. So his insights and experience for the cycling element is a little bit varied. And then finally, we're fortunate enough to have Paul with us today. Paul's an amazing individual who's got over 40 years of experience in the business-to-business arena in terms of fleet risk support. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, Paul, he does also have 3 masters in driver safety. He's won the Brake Safety Awards twice, and he even goes as far as providing expert consultancy to the Department for Transport. As we all know, they're the individuals who implemented these new changes. So what I'd like to quickly do is just sort of touch on who Cardinus are, what we do and why we do it. So essentially, Cardinus is broken into 6 core divisions. We have firstly our ergonomics division, in which we're the largest provider of DSE risk services globally. And we've got over 2.7 million people that go for our online software to ensure that they're safe while working. We do also have a property and risk insurance side of our business, and as you can see on the screen, they have the ability to provide anything from the fire risk assessment surveys and building evaluations, but we can also go a little bit further and do security reviews. Further to that security section, we do have an entire division dedicated, and we have the ability to provide personal safety through to lone working policy creation and much more. We are supported by our own internal team of consultants, and we have the ability to provide that bespoke competent person packages to those smaller organizations where they don't have the available funds to employ such an individual. And we can also undertake sort of bespoke learning and training. On the subject of sort of training and learning, we do have our own suite of safety learning, all endorsed by the IIRSM, so the International Institute of Risk and Safety Management. And essentially, we have the ability to provide software ranging from sort of your COSH through to data protection, mental health, even cybersecurity and slips, trips and falls. The section we're going to be focusing on today is our fleet risk. But essentially, the reason we do what we do is we want to ensure that clients have safer staff. We want to make sure we tick all the right boxes, but our focus is more of training, not testing. We want to promote the right culture so that you start to see the return on investment. And return on investment can be measured in a number of different ways, be it the number of incidents, even the value of said incidents, even down to people being off work and even speeding up the first notification of loss. As a business, we are very process driven. And as you can see, we've got every ISO you can possibly shake a stick at. We are accredited and work in partnership with a number of organizations, and we're even a corporate donor and member of the Break Road Safety charity. Obviously, I am going to be biased. I like being employed and I like my job. I am going to tell you how good we are, but to sort of further educate and sort of cement that in place, it's the fact that this is essentially just a list of a couple of clients that are more those household names where we support risk reduction initiatives. So without any further ado, I just wanted to sort of touch base on the fact that if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat and we'll be picking those up at the end. So what I'll now do is pass control over to my colleague Damien. Bear with me one moment. And Damien, I've just promoted you to host, so you are good to share your screen.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Aden. And I'd just like to welcome the participants here today. Just let me get the little PowerPoint onto the screen for everyone now. So Aden, could you just confirm that that's on screen at the moment? Yeah?
I can indeed.
Okay, fantastic. Well, folks, thank you very much indeed for attending today. My name's Damien Keys, and Aden gave me such a nice welcome today. Thank you very much indeed, Aden. Folks, I am indeed a grade 6 ADI. I'm also a class 1 police trainer here, and I do that in lots of different parts of the UK. But I think it's also important to say that I'm also a driver, a cyclist, and a pedestrian, and I have been doing that for most of my young and indeed adult life as well. So the changes in the highway code also affect myself as well. So let's just move briskly into the presentation itself, ladies and gents. What we're going to cover here today, well, by the end of this short presentation, folks, you will be familiar with the recent changes in the most up-to-date version of the highway code for Great Britain. You'll be informed as to the reasoning and the thoughts that lie behind these changes and why they're important to you, your employees, and everyone else on our roads. You'll be aware of how they affect you when driving on private journeys, and more to the point, you will be aware of how they affect your employees whenever they're driving in company business as well. So I think it's important that we take a look at all of these types of things. With this in mind, what I'd like to do, folks, is look at why the changes have become necessary. Here we have a copy of the 1931 copy of the Highway Code, the very first one that was published all those years ago. And as everyone can imagine, folks, 91 years later, risk has changed on our roads. And as a result of that, we now have the revised copy of the Highway Code. Generally, there are revisions in the Highway Code on a regular basis, but certainly in 2022, these have been wider publicised, and indeed they've been more focused as well to try to reduce risk. Now, with those changes, ladies and gents, we need to take a look at the casualties on the roads of Great Britain. This is 2019, ladies and gents, and what I would say is in 2019, it could have moved on a little bit then. From then, as we emerge out of lockdown, these figures could be a little bit skewed at the moment. I would probably say they are. But in 2019, folks, we had 17 per hour, 17 casualties per hour. That related to 419 casualties per day and just over 153,000 casualties per year, translating into tragedy for families, victims, road users of all types. But more to the point, translating into an estimated £36 billion in usage by government bodies to try to cope with that, not to mention what private firms, etc., are putting into it as well. So I think it costs an enormous amount of money to deal with road casualties. Now, the ups and downs of it all. Let's take a look at fatalities, but it's important before I maybe introduce this slide to say that these are facts translating into percentages, folks. It's not just a numbers game. I wouldn't like to change this into a higher and lower type game. because we're talking about human lives here, and I think it's important that it's a consequence of reality relating to an increase in road risk that we see amongst clients and certainly amongst people traveling on our roads. So in 2019, occupants of vehicles accounted for 42% of road deaths, pedestrians 27%, motorcyclists 19%, and pedal cyclists 6%. Just a quick overview, if you just turn your eye to the little graphic on the right hand side, 2018 versus 2019, well, the green figures have gone down a little, whilst in that time the figures in orange have increased. So you can see yourself, folks, amongst vulnerable road users, the consequences are starting to increase, not only for the vulnerable road users, but for the poor drivers and businesses whose employees are causing these collisions or are certainly involved in them as well. So let's look at it slightly differently now, ladies and gents. Casualties per billion passenger miles, 2019 again, pre-COVID, and it's largely thought that these casualties could have increased in number since we started to emerge out of lockdown. We're not free of the pandemic, but the risks are rising as we start to get out and mobile a little bit more. And I think the startling thing about this graphic is the first 3 bars there. You can see how the incidents have increased amongst pedestrians, cyclists, and even motorcycle riders as well. Whilst those of us that are better protected, car drivers, people in buses, certainly amongst vans and lorries, are starting to decrease significantly. So the risks in most of those vulnerable road users are starting to increase enormously. And that's why we have the need to change at the moment. It's very, very important. And the authorities are working towards that end, protecting businesses, protecting private individuals, protecting everyone. It's the nature of driving, isn't it? Even before COVID, the authorities had increasing concerns relating to the significant increase amongst vulnerable road users, children, elderly people, cyclists, motorcyclists, all of those type of road users were on the increase whenever we look at casualties. Especially in larger towns and villages, folks, London, Edinburgh, Cardiff, to name but a few, the dangers were increasing enormously even before COVID. And I think that affects, COVID has affected the numbers even more, especially as we start to move out of lockdown. People are active again. People are starting to share their lives, feeling a little less vulnerable, but feeling vulnerable at the same time in many different ways that we'll look at in a little while. So the risks we face, I think, are enormous, ladies and gents. This is a picture of central London. And with that one picture, I think a picture states 1,000 words. I think the group can see how the risks have changed enormously over in recent years. We have more cyclists now sharing an already densely populated road space, populated with cars, buses, lorries, etc., and how those types of road users might interact with each other. We've got vulnerable road users, people that are less experienced, new cyclists since the pandemic has occurred, with more cyclists, more pedestrians, but equally we've got more drivers. We've got newly qualified drivers. We need to consider how less experienced drivers and riders might interact with each other in a negative way, and how that might affect your employees on business as well, already stressed and pressured by having tasks to do, daily chores to do, already in areas where they're not familiar with routes, etc., new routes, going to new job sites, etc. You can tell how the risks are starting to rise enormously. But as well as that, ladies and gents, we have the pandemic effect as well, and there's no escaping this nowadays. We're emerging, I think, not out of a pandemic, but we're coming through it at the moment, although maybe still touching on the peripherals of the pandemic. More people are interested in improving their health, something that started during the pandemic. More people walking, more people jogging, more people getting out and active, promoted by government and television agencies. It's all something that tended to happen. We also, of course, have the pandemic effect and people avoiding the use of public transport, communal germs, not wanting to use that public transport, so wanting to be out, active, walking, cycling, using those types and modes of transports that can cause even more risks for us as well. Of course, with that, we also have the increased parking charges in towns and villages and cities, and the increase in the urban lower emissions zones as well. That's brought about a situation whereby people are starting to use more eco-friendly vehicles, motorcycles, eco-cars, certainly vehicles that are silent, vehicles that pedestrians can't hear. So the risks that poses to vulnerable road users whenever they can't see the vehicles is certainly enormous. We have the e-scooters and bicycle schemes as well. You can now rent some of these e-scooters and bicycles in most cities now. And I would like to pose the question for maybe later, does rider inexperience increase the dangers, not only for you, but for your employees as well? I think probably without a shadow of a doubt, that's something we'll talk about later. And I think the risk certainly improves. But there's other pandemic effects as well, ladies and gents, more pressures, more risk. I think what we have on screen at the moment is indicative of many of our larger towns and cities now. This is Blackfriars Bridge in London. And I think this is a good example of how infrastructure in most of our main towns and cities has changed. We've now got two cycle lanes here, one going each direction to accommodate the cyclists. But how does that affect the drivers? Well, of course, vehicular capacity is decreasing in order to accommodate the lanes. And we also have the increase in 20-mile-an-hour zones and limits as well to protect the vulnerable road users. And I think it's always worth asking ourselves, how might that affect the drivers of vehicles that are already stressed and pressured in these densely populated areas? No matter how much we want to, folks, we just can't return to pre-pandemic times. I think we're in a one-way street of road risk at the moment, and road risk that affects all types of road users. That brings us straight back to this particular slide, ladies and gents. My personal feelings on this: shouldn't those of us that are better protected and more experienced be prepared to look after the more vulnerable road users? I think that's an ethos we should all strive to adhere to, and I think that's common sense at the end of the day. But maybe common sense isn't so common whenever we're all pressured and facing road risk. Now, let's look at the changes and how they affect all road users then. So let's see how the changes come into play. The hierarchy of road users, first of all, is a concept that was born. And what it basically says is it places those road users most at risk in the event of a collision at the top of the hierarchy. Now, it's important to stress that the hierarchy of road users does not remove the need everyone has to behave responsibly. Everyone should behave responsibly. I think care, courtesy, and consideration is something that we should promote as individuals, as businesses, and we should promote that amongst our drivers. I think that would help an awful lot. The road users most likely to be injured in the event of a collision are pedestrians, cyclists, horse riders, and motorcyclists, with children and older people and even disabled being more at risk. Children, less experienced. Elderly, obviously, they've got longer reaction times. As we get older, our eyesight tends to fail a little bit, and that's certainly something that has happened to me. I didn't always wear glasses, but there we go. The following rules have been inserted into the Highway Code. Code H rules, these clarify the concepts that we're talking about today and the concept that we'll open for discussion. Let's take a look at these. New rule number 1, ladies and gents. Well, this applies to everyone, ladies and gents. Rule number H1 applies to everyone, and it quite simply states that all road users need to be aware of the Highway Code, be considerate and responsible to others. Everyone suffers when a collision occurs. I think basically care, courtesy, and consideration fits quite well into that little part of the presentation there. It's an ethos that I try to drive to, cycle to, I try to adhere to whenever I'm walking, and I think everybody should. Those driving vehicles that cause the greatest harm have greatest responsibility to take care of others. Larger vehicles and cars fall into that category whenever you look at it. Just as cyclists and horse riders have responsibility to reduce danger for others. So again, it places pedestrians at the top of the hierarchy and then works down all road users. Everyone still has the responsibility to take care of their own safety and the safety of others. Again, just to reiterate, children, older adults, and those with disabilities are more at risk for lots of different reasons. Also, we need to consider those with impairments, sight, hearing, etc. Things that are maybe not apparent to the car drivers. But remember, sight and hearing issues can be an issue for pedestrians who may not be able to hear electric vehicles approaching them as well. So we have those issues as well. So without further ado, let's look at some of the changes here. New rule H2. This applies to all drivers, riders, horse riders, and cyclists. And what it basically states is at a junction, you should give way to pedestrians crossing or waiting to cross the road into which you're turning from or turning into. So that's a rule in the highway code now, and it's an important rule. Note pedestrians include wheelchairs, mobility scooters, and e-scooters that are not even mentioned yet in the not e-scooters that aren't even mentioned in the highway code, but we'll touch on that in a few moments' time. Folks, this is a rule that is quite likely to cause pressure on road users on already densely populated areas as well, and is quite likely to cause a little bit of mayhem and frustration amongst your drivers and certainly private drivers as well. Rule number H3, let's take a look at that one. This applies to drivers and motorcyclists. And again, what it says is you should not cut across cyclists, horse riders, or horse-drawn vehicles going ahead. When you, as the driver, are turning into or out of a junction, you should stop and wait for a gap. In other words, folks, you need to stop and let the cyclist or the rider have priority over yourself. And again, folks, this is something that could cause a lot of pressure in densely populated areas where road conditions are already stretched to maximum for road users. What it basically says is do not turn at a junction if to do so would make others stop or swerve. And again, that's good practice, ladies and gents, and it's one that we should all adhere to. Rule number 72, this is one that's now in there for cyclists, and there are two basic parts to this rule. The first part of the rule says that ride in the center of your lane on quiet roads or in heavy traffic to be seen easily, but be ready to move to the left and let faster traffic pass. I think that's important. Cyclists might always do that, and having a cycling background, I fully understand how cyclists and motorists can act out on those roads in a negative way against each other. I'm fully aware of that. It also says in busier roads or in faster traffic, allow others to overtake where it is safe by moving to the left. In other words, folks, a minimum of 0.5 meters from the left-hand curb. What it basically says is the cyclist is entitled to 0.5 meters of the left lane, but if they feel at risk, they can stay in the center of the lane for safety reasons. And I think, folks, really, car drivers are protected by airbags. I haven't seen any cyclists with airbags, let's put it that way. Rule number 73, this is a new rule for cyclists now, and again, this one could cause friction among cyclists and other road users. At some junctions have special signs, traffic lights, and road markings for cyclists, and where they have them, the cyclist needs to use them to make their journey easier. So it gives the cyclist the right to use those road markings to their advantage, let's put it that way. Otherwise, proceed as if you were driving a vehicle, position in the center of the lane to be more visible and to avoid being overtaken where this would be dangerous. So again, it's giving the cyclist the opportunities and the right to protect the road space, to lessen the danger to themselves, but in some ways, I suppose, to lessen the dangers to other people as well. But as I said, this could cause pressure on otherwise overcrowded streets and roads as well in our inner cities and amongst vulnerable road users and those that are less experienced as well. It's always an issue. And of course, if they don't feel safe, it may be easier to dismount and walk their bike across the junction. So it does give them that option as well. It's about risk reduction at the end of the day. Overtaking cyclists is a new rule that's in there as well. This applies to all drivers, ladies and gents, and what it basically says here is when traveling at speeds up to 30 miles an hour, you should give at least 1.5 meters of clearance to the cyclist. A cyclist, roughly, what, 500, 600, 800 millimeters wide, depending on shoulder width. But if the cyclist falls off, obviously, onto the road surface, falls flat down, they're much taller than that. They occupy much more road space. So less space, less speed, ladies and gents, slowing down. When overtaking cyclists at higher speed, it also says you should give even more space. It gives the cyclist the right to command that part of the road, and the guidance is now there to let the driver know how much space they should give. And that's something that is certainly worth sharing with your employees in those urban areas as well. The Dutch reach is something that's also now promoted as well to improve safety. Yes, you've guessed it. It's something that was thought about in Holland quite a number of years ago. It promotes safety in that if the driver is going to open the vehicle door, they should use the gear stick hand to open the door and hold on to the door card with the other hand. It promotes a little bit of peripheral vision, turning a little bit, taking into account those vulnerable road users, cyclists that could be passing, but not forgetting as well the passenger has responsibilities as well on the passenger side, opening the door, using a similar fashion, and looking out for pedestrians and maybe e-scooters, etc., that might be on the curbs as well. So the Dutch reach certainly reduces risk of having collision with someone in your blind area. E-scooters, of course, as well. We have to consider these. They're being used in our inner towns and cities now. What I would say, it is not illegal to use one of these e-scooters in the United Kingdom. It's not illegal to own one of these. My apologies. It's not illegal to own one of these, but it is illegal to ride them on any road, pavement, footpath, cycle lane, or pedestrianised zone. But you do see children doing that. In the areas that I live in, have known parents to buy these at Christmas time for the kids, and it brings a lot of risk, doesn't it? What I would say, folks, is the exception to that is those cities that have established authorised trials at the moment, where drivers must be licensed. So it is a requirement in licensing law to participate in the schemes. You must be licensed to ride one of the vehicles as well. However, we estimate that there are around about 60,000 scooters in the trials in the cities at the moment, but it's estimated there are over 1 million of these scooters privately owned. So risks are absolutely enormous at the moment, folks. And what I would say about these scooters, they're not even mentioned in the highway code at the moment, but we are moving towards a situation where the highway code, as time moves on, will probably bring in some guidance and rules with regards to e-scooters as they see it necessary to do so. What I would say is be aware. Don't trust other road users, folks. Trust your own instinct. Expect the unexpected and be ready to create space and time to allow for other people's mistakes. Avoid a collision. It takes less time to avoid a collision than it takes to fill in an insurance claims collision form, let's put it that way. And the hassle that's involved for businesses and the amount of money that's lost whenever we have to deal with collisions is enormous. So please expect the unexpected actions of other road users. In summary, ladies and gents, I would like to say potential risks are there for all road users who don't understand the changes. This will be compounded by those who travel to unfamiliar areas. So in other words, some employees traveling to areas that they might not go on a regular basis, and maybe traveling in unfamiliar traffic patterns and layouts. Again, we have novice drivers, novice cyclists, and again, people in business as well that affects as well. Everyone loses focus at times. It's human nature, ladies and gents. We can't help it. That's human nature. And the purpose of road traffic law is to make our behavior predictable and try to predict out risk, as we do at Cardinus Risk Management. Everyone makes mistakes. No one goes out to cause harm on purpose. And I think that's an important point to make as well. It's imperative to watch for the unexpected actions of other road users, create space, create time, have time in reserve. As I said, it takes less time to avoid a collision than it does to fill out a claims report form, and I think that's important. Ladies and gents, we will save questions to the end of the presentation today. But thank you very, very much indeed for your time, and I'll hand control of the meeting back to one of my other colleagues. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gents.
Thank you, Damien. What we'll do is now hand over to Paul Ripley. So just one moment as we switch presenters here. Suel, could you change presenters for us?
Yep, bear with me one moment.
Just while that's going on, so in a moment, Paul will be joining us to give you an overview of the highway code changes that came into effect on the 25th of March. So at the moment, Paul will have the ability to screen share. Okay, Paul, you've now got privilege, so if you would like to share your screen. I'm free now.
Can you see that?
I can indeed, thank you.
Okay. Okay, shall I take over, Aden?
Yes, please, Paul.
Okay. Okay, many thanks, Aden. Got to say, what a really cool name, the most coolest name in the industry, by the way. Aden's a sales guru at the prolific Cardinus Risk Management team. And for the very splendid introduction they gave us at the start of the presentation, and also the excellent and informative overview from our good friend Damien Keys on the highway code, the new rules and regulations, and road user priorities and hierarchy. That was really, really good, Damien, and I got that myself actually. So we're now going to turn our attention to one of the UK's biggest road risk in our lifetime. Of course, I mean the use of mobile phones when driving, which I believe is a dangerous driving epidemic of colossal proportions. It's obvious that the UK government thinks so too, and to this end have finally introduced some new laws to tackle this unsafe and risky driving behaviour. So I'm now going to share my screen, going to do a short PowerPoint and go through some pertinent points about the new laws and what they mean to all drivers generally. So let me start off with trying to share something now. And we'll just zoom into the second slide here. I've put this on here because it really attacks this problem that we've got with drivers being literally addicted to phone use, and it's their life source, to be frank with you. They will leave the home without the wallet, without the handbag, but never without the phone. It becomes their sole source of a connected life, as it were. So the reasons behind the changes to the mobile phone use is that people are addicted to their phones. And unfortunately, this moves over to when they're driving as well. And we know from the research that's been done, it is a hugely dangerous activity that many people use. As I said before, it's the life source of so many people, and it's a huge part of their connected life. However, it does present us all, especially with the risk management thing that we're trying to promote here. It's the biggest threat to road safety in our lifetime, absolutely without doubt. And using phones when driving is a high risk driving behaviour that's technically running out of control. Okay, I'll keep going back to this, but anyway. So the numbers tell the story. The numbers generally do tell the story. And this has come from our friends at ZenDrive, a US company, by the way, but they say that 88% of drivers actually admit to looking at their phones when driving. I think our friends at Lexus did a fantastic video of 4.6, it was called 4.6 seconds, which is the time it takes to type out, to literally type out a text message to a friend, for argument's sake. So we're not looking at the road for 4.5 seconds. We're driving blind, and I call this blind driving, to be frank with you. And 57% of all crashes involve phone use, and unbelievably, 71% of all commercial vehicle crashes are aligned with phone use when driving. Now, ZenDrive put on this survey. It was carried out. I believe it was a colossal figure of 866 billion miles of data. It was in the US, and it's a little bit more difficult to get some succinct and correct and concise advice on exactly what the problem is in the UK, because I think 43 police forces take their own records of this rather than a central repository, as it were. Okay, so this obviously, chaps say, without a shadow of a doubt, it's a leading cause of vehicle collisions in the UK. I think that's got to be said about that. Okay, so now mobile devices and driving. What exactly has changed? We know before it was illegal to use a handheld phone, and you get a £200 fine, you get 6 points on your license. I don't think that the laws have actually made that much of a change. I think people just continuing to use the phones. And some businesses, it's the way that face, as it were, the fleet managers or the directors of the company want to speak to the driver. How do they do that? And they need to be in contact with the drivers on the road. Of course they do. But how do they do it? So they make a phone call. And I spoke to many fleet managers about this, and they kind of say, well, you know, how do we speak to our drivers? There is a solution to that, which we'll potentially talk about in the future. But let's have a look at what we've got here now. So previously prohibited, holding a mobile phone, and I want to just emphasize there, holding a mobile phone or a similar device. To make a phone call, to receive a phone call, send a text message or send an email, or access social media sites or streaming services. So this was previously prohibited. And like I just said 2 minutes ago, I think it's made very little change in the behavior of drivers. They just think that using the phone is somehow acceptable. But what we're trying to do, you know, and Cardinus absolutely totally involved in this as well, we're trying to make it as irresponsible as drink driving, and now we've got the new thing of drug driving as well, which has been around for many years, to be frank with you. But it's great that some companies and also the people in charge of this, and Department for Transport, the DVSA, are actually now looking into these huge areas, huge problem areas of driver distraction. Is a colossal one. But like I say, so is drink driving and so is drug driving. Okay, so it's now, the new laws are now extended to include holding a mobile phone or similar device to even illuminate the screen or just to unlock the device is now categorically illegal, or even to check the time or notifications, which is what a lot of people do. And once again, eyes off the road, therefore your observation is completely gone. And when you look up, you may have stationary traffic in front of you. You know, you're traveling at 70 miles an hour on a motorway, and you've got stationary traffic in front of you, 200 yards in front of you. Once again, emergency stops all the time. So we can't make or receive or reject a telephone call or internet call. And when you think about that, you can't make, you can't receive or reject a phone call. And sending, receiving or uploading oral or written content or a photo or a video. Using the camera. This was possible before. I don't know if you remember, there was a loophole there where you were allowed to actually use the camera to record something and even stream through things in the past, you know. But anyway, the video or sound recording functionality and drafting any text message, which has always been potentially one of the most dangerous uses of mobile phones when you're driving. So this is quite a categorical and inclusive list that accessing stored data, including documents, books, audio files, photos, videos, films, playlists, notes, or messages. I mean, that couldn't get any more comprehensive, to be frank with you, the what it is just written down there. And accessing any application, any software program on the internet. So you can be prosecuted if holding a phone when stopped at a traffic light or in a traffic queue. And this needs to be mentioned. This is kind of where, well, if I'm not doing it when I'm driving, if I stop at a red traffic light or I'm in a traffic queue, I'll just check my emails. I just need to send a text to so-and-so. And this is where the temptation is. And if people have a problem with not looking at the phone and not using the phone or be connected or contacted by the phone, it is technically a huge problem. And it's this addiction to the phones that so many have. Yes, there are some exceptions to the new laws, and drivers will still be able to continue using a device, hands-free, whilst driving, such as a sat-nav, but only if it's secured in a cradle. Now, I've done a fair bit of research on this, and it does appear to be a very slightly grey area. Can I still use my phone if it's in a cradle? I want to make a phone call, and apparently you cannot. So if somebody wants to talk about that a bit later on, I'm going to end on that anyway, but why it's illegal, I've just been talking to the police about it, funnily enough. You can continue to make emergency calls, but only if it's impossible. That you have to keep moving to make an emergency call if you want to report, let's say, a pile-up on a motorway. It's that kind of thing. And when you're going into, you know, a Costa Coffee or perhaps moving into McDonald's and you're going to make a contactless payment, your car has to be stationary and goods have to be provided at the same time as you're making a payment for something. So that's the kind of rule where it is exception to the new laws. But like I say, the vehicle has to be stationary when this exception is utilised. Okay, final penalty points. Anyone caught using handheld phone when driving will face a minimum £200 fine and 6 penalty points on the licence. And literally in a couple of days, you can lose your licence with the ban coming at 12 penalty points. So this is getting now to be pretty strict, and it really has needed. So there's so much time, but let's get really strict on this. And I think that there needs to be a culture change in companies employing drivers and allowing the phones to be used, and they're making the phone calls to the drivers. Or I'm just very wary about how fragile that no phone policies are when a driver. Maybe some companies think that they're shifting the responsibility and the legality over to the driver if he signed a thing. I will not use my phone when I'm driving on company business. So this is a huge grey area. And I think if there's a fatality accident, this driver will be going to jail. And could you do more than just getting quite a flimsy and frail no phone policy that a driver signs? Could you actually do more? And it's something that we're going to talk about in the future as well, by the way. Okay. Something that people seem to think that hands-free is risk-free. I cannot get any more adamant than saying it is never, ever risk-free to use a phone, and primarily because you're taking your eyes away from the road scene. So you lose that concentration, you lose that observation or your visual scanning, as I call it. And this is also, I must say as well, whilst it's forward, we're highlighting phone use here, but the new vehicles that are coming out with quite complicated and difficult to manage and difficult to process infotainment, just to turn a fan on. I've got a chat friend has got one, has got a Volvo, and he has to press to put his fan on. If he's going to turn his fan up, it's like a 4-stage process. Eyes off the road to make sure he's actually touching that fan thing, and then he can get more fan in the car, as it were, more air running through the car. But some of these are so complicated and often quite difficult to navigate. And I think it's also a significant risk as well that you need to be aware of, and talk to your drivers about this and do some kind of presentation to your drivers of the risks that they're going through simply by taking their eyes off the road. Okay, it's one of the biggest myths that hands-free calling is safe and it's permissible. Yes, okay, it is lawful until you're involved in a collision. Now, I strongly advise drivers do not engage in any activity that distracts them from the driving task. This could still lead to an offence of not being, quote unquote, in proper control of a vehicle, and may result in a prosecution for dangerous or careless driving. And careless driving is one of the fatal 5. If anybody's risk averse and works for a company that talks about the fatal 5, careless driving, dangerous driving is one of those fatal 5 that we speak about. Okay, so that chap is there, but opinions and advice on the new laws. The RAC have said that they strongly welcome the change. We all welcome the change, of course we do, because it's moving in the right direction. My view, to be honest with you, the new laws are a halfway house to what's actually needed. They focus purely on handheld devices, which to me does miss the point. And a wider appreciation of how even hands-free technology can distract drivers is needed. But as I say, that's for next time. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, phone use when driving is the biggest road safety pandemic in our lifetime. And I want to sort of thank you for listening to me. And I think that Aden said we're going to leave some questions out, or you may have some questions that Aden's going to control now. So hopefully you got something out of that. And just tell your drivers or your good selves to sort of keep away from the phone. The place for it is a glove box, to be honest with you, and I would prefer turning it off Do I ever answer phones when I'm driving? Not on your life, but that's been me as a road safety guy. And I want to survive on the road, and it's about survival. It's about self-preservation. And if somebody just looked at their attitude and think to themselves, this is about self-preservation, I've got to look after my own safety. That's very few know how to do that on the road. So do look after yourself, put that phone away, and just do not use it. Okay, back to you, Aidan. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Paul. We have had a couple of questions come in. I've got a couple that I'd like to direct to yourself, Paul. One of the first ones was from Lisa, and she's essentially asked, there is no real mention of smartwatches while driving. Given the fact that all technology can be sort of interacted in this way, you know, can she still access the phone functions on it? As you would say, it is still one of those in-vehicle distractions.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that you make your own judgments on that kind of thing. The government haven't mentioned anything like that. They haven't mentioned about infotainment centres in new vehicles, specifically cars, rather than HGVs and that. But it is a problem. Distraction is always a problem. Even just looking away from the road scene, just to sort of light a cigarette, for argument's sake, or turn the heater up, and anything like that that takes your eyes away from that road scene, and that remains a grey area. I would imagine that if a fatality happened, the police would absolutely look at the data on that phone, on that watch, whatever you were currently using at the time, and you would be going to jail if there's a fatality accident. There's no doubt about that. But the infotainment, I don't see how they can use that. So if that answers Lisa's questions, but it is a bit of a grey area, may I say, and there's like no guidance on that currently at the moment. But I've been speaking to West Yorkshire Police about it, funnily enough, you know, and what you can do, what you can't do with these, you know, when your phone is in a cradle, and there's very little guidance on it. It just seems that they've missed a little bit of a few points there. To be honest with you, when it's been really hot news, you know. Hopefully that's okay for Lisa.
No, I agree. And I think it's one of those things is to bear in mind that even though something may still fall within a legal option, you could still be prosecuted because you could be found to not be in proper control of the vehicle at that time. And it could be a contributing item to an incident. We have had another question come in from Trevor, and quite rightly so. He's essentially asked if you can use your sat nav on your phone, should the device be in a cradle, i.e. sort of using Google Maps, or is it one of those where we would essentially need to set it up prior to departing?
Yeah, definitely. Anything to do with setting things up prior to departure has to be a priority. I read something this morning, funny enough. I just get a bit involved in these things, and I do as much research because I want to know about these things, and I want to know more than the man in the street knows, because I get asked about these things quite a lot. Yeah, set your sat nav up absolutely before you, and it says that you can do that, but you mustn't touch that phone. Once you're driving, you should not. It's illegal to now just touch the phone. So set the sat nav up before you drive and press start as you do. I mean, I use Waze, whatever, but you know, press start. Okay, and away you go. But yeah, I mean, there are some grey areas, Trevor. There's no doubt about that, and I really appreciate your question. But yeah, just do everything before you leave, to be honest with you, so you're not touching it. And I think that will improve safety dramatically. But I think if it's in a cradle, where are you going to put this? Because if you put it on the windscreen in such an area that it could obscure certain hazards, you know, cyclists, dogs, animals, whatever is around, and you know, you can also be prosecuted because you're causing an obstruction to your vision. So be very careful where you put it. And I think it's like, you know, it would be probably better down away from the screen, to be honest with you. You know, in a heater outlet, something like that, where you just get these phone attachments that work quite well there. So I hope that answers Trevor's question.
No, thank you, Paul. One of the questions I was expecting, if I was honest, was essentially how we evidence this to staff and employees. What I essentially want to make sure that everyone's aware of is that as an employer, you do have a duty of care to inform your employees about all health and safety, but also to consult with them. So if there are changes in the guidance, it is on the employer to actually review the risk assessments, their health and safety policies, but you also need to inform your colleagues and your staff about said changes. So there are a number of ways that you can do that. So typically, toolbox talks, emails, newsletters, meetings, webinars such as this, all are deemed as acceptable. Within our own business, we opt to do it through newsletters. Essentially, as long as you can demonstrate, and the real key part here is evidence, that you have provided the information, that is it in terms of mitigating it from a duty of care perspective. Essentially, with regards to the highway code, employers should inform all staff if they drive for work. And essentially, you can cascade that responsibility down to line managers to inform staff, or generally the principal health and safety person. What I wanted to do is just take you through just a couple of last few things prior to us finishing today. So I'm just going to share my screen in just a moment. So hopefully that should all be visible for everyone now. Essentially, as a business, we provide end-to-end risk management, be it from the initial driving license check to even corporate audits. But we have the ability to support a variety of things such as the in-vehicle training, even virtual one-to-ones, workshops for those senior managers and other members of staff who have responsibility for staff who drive on business. As well as
we can't see your screen. Could you try sharing again, please?
the joys of technology. So hopefully it's now working.
Yes, yeah.
There we go.
So, thank you.
Right, I'm not going to repeat myself, but essentially we provide the end-to-end piece. So if we go down to the realms of sort of software, we can provide the risk assessments and e-learning, ways to evidence that you are legally compliant. Seminars such as the one we've done as a webinar today, we can deliver for clients, as well as fleet reviews and even consultancy for those organizations. But most importantly, the one thing we want you to take away is how we promote the culture. So following sort of closing this webinar down, over the next couple of days, I'm going to be amalgamating a few different pieces of information and content to share with you all. What this will include is access to an online self-fleet review tool. So you don't have to worry about someone trying to upsell something to you. This will give you the ability to put in some information and take about 5 to 10 minutes surrounding your fleet, your operations, how it all works. But the report that kicks out the back of it will give you some guidance on what you should be doing, how you should be doing it, and things to maybe take into consideration. To further sort of evidence the parts that Damien was touching on surrounding the vulnerable road users, we'll also provide you with some driver bulletin templates. They'll all open up in a Microsoft Word format, so you can rebrand them, edit the text to include approaches and policies and procedures that are unique to each organization. And these cover a variety of things from cyclists through to winter driving, even environmental considerations. We'll send out a vehicle checklist because obviously, given the importance of ensuring that your vehicle is up to par and legally compliant, is sort of a very key thing as part of safety. Further to that, we have a whole host of white papers. I believe there's over 25 from the top of my head. We've got resource packs for line managers who have a responsibility for drivers, even a fleet manager resource pack, which we'll be able to share. All this information is going to be essentially utilized by you to be able to promote the right safety standards and right culture. Lastly, on a bit of a side note, given the massive increase in COVID over the last couple of weeks, what I'll also do is provide you with access to our COVID-19 resource hub, which again is filled with additional content, literature and information just tackling more than just your fleet. So it could be your building risk, your employee risk, as well as a variety of wellbeing templates. And they say, if there is more information, you want to know more about what we do, how we can help and what we can do to support you and your ongoing risk reduction initiatives, all my contact details are on the screen. I just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you to everyone who attended today. It's been great to have the opportunity to share this information with you. I'll stay online alongside Paul and Damien for the next few minutes, should there be any further questions. But thank you everyone for your time today. And we'll send out a recording.
Thank you. Aden, can I just say something here for a moment? You can actually use your phone if it's stored in a dashboard holder. A dashboard holder allows the phone to be connected to the vehicle, which means that people are not touching their phones whilst driving. And hands-free means that a phone call is made and ended through buttons in the vehicle and not touching the phone in any way. So that's something that I just didn't have a chance to point out there, but that is definitely worth people understanding and knowing. Hands-free is never risk-free, and it actually never was. But people think it's there, it's fine, you know. But just don't use the phone, and that is categorically the only way that we're going to develop a culture of duty of care and lowering the risk that is considerable and significant with these phones when we're driving. Okay, thanks, Damien.
And I wholeheartedly agree, and it's one of those that it's important to remind staff that even though it is easy to pick up said phone, the research shows that if someone is texting or they're in a heated conversation, there are instances where their reactions are delayed to more than that of a drunk driver. Just noticed that my colleague Sue just flagged up a question from Trevor with regards to sharing the material afterwards. By all means, yes, what we'll do is we'll pull the slide decks together and amalgamate them into one, because I appreciate we're running multiple different slide decks here. So what we'll do, we'll zip them into a smaller folder so we can compress the file size down so that we can deploy them via email as well. So we'll stay on for a couple more minutes. And I appreciate all the comments, and thank you, Cara, for flagging that my screen wasn't showing. Unfortunately, I wasn't looking at that one, so I couldn't tell myself. Yeah, we've just got a couple of more coming through. So one of the questions from Jasmine, if I just clear all these notifications that are popping up on my laptop here. I have customers who are constantly asking for an ETA. So in that sort of scenario, what options do they have? So that's quite a good question, because I'm guessing that we'd essentially need to be able to communicate with your drivers. Paul, are you aware of any sort of software solutions or approaches that an organisation could implement so they can sort of engage with their drivers and be able to provide clients with ETAs on sort of deliveries, expectations and arrivals?
Yeah, I absolutely am. It's something that I think we were going to leave for a more detailed observations of distracted driving and the solutions that Cardinus can provide for that through my good self. There is a solution out there which, whether it's right or wrong to say that right now, we sell 3 solutions to completely eradicate phone use. One allows phone use, but everything is sent back to the fleet manager, and it's only technically an emergency. But what we do, absolutely, risk-averse companies have got to think about this and stop ringing the drivers or trying to have some kind of methodology to get through to the drivers about time-sensitive message. There is something out there that, excuse me, that we sell, which does not mean the driver has to interact with his phone, look at the phone, touch the phone. He doesn't have to interact with his phone in any way, shape, or form. And it just reads out aloud messages. He cannot, or the driver cannot, reply to these messages. If he wants to reply, he pulls over, handbrake on, ignition off. So he parks in that situation and then he calls back. But there is this, it's absolutely pretty prolific, and it just doesn't have to be in a vehicle. It just runs all the time if that's what you want. But it is a fantastic opportunity to cut down phone use, but still create that connection between the driver and the fleet manager. And whilst it is a distraction, because you're driving and you're just listening to a message, it kind of just goes into your psyche, really, and you're getting a time to, right, don't go to Peterborough, that's been cancelled now. Your next delivery will be at Loughborough, which was your next delivery anyway. So it can cut out this like massive, colossal mileage that these drivers, delivery drivers do, and give a time frame delivery time to the thing. Then they can ring their customer from headquarters and say, Paul should be there for about 2 o'clock. It would take the traffic flow or whatever. So I think that, yes, there is something out there, I think that these will be, Cardinus will probably be using these in the future, that we're still talking about, by the way. So that's all I can say at the moment. But if you want to have a look, just jump on the website and have a look at that, and come back to me if that's of any help to you whatsoever. This big time.
Thank you, Paul. So we have a similar question from James. It's for aimed at fleets that use handheld devices for job, dispatch, nav, so couriers, your multi-drop sort of drivers, where updated routes and jobs can be sent mid-journey. But the need to action by touching the device, assuming that's not allowed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but it's the moment that they start to engage and interact with that device, that's when we have a problem. And does that also apply to the handheld devices that aren't technically a mobile?
I think it does, yeah, because it's about the term distraction. And if it's a connected proposition, then technically speaking, as soon as you pick that up and start looking at it, and I would imagine it's a really good question. Could I give you an 100% factual answer on that? Probably not. But I think that once you start bringing the word connected device in here, irrespective of any, I think it is a part of a device, I would err on the side of caution and say that would be illegal, to be frank with you now, especially the move, because this is not just for mobile phones, this is for devices in a vehicle. So I would imagine that would be illegal.
Perfect. No, thank you for that.
I think, Aden, to be frank with you, I would check with a transport lawyer on that, who may just be able to sort of highlight that and go a little bit deeper than I'm able to right now.
It's one of those when Department for Transport and DVSA pull their hands together and sort of create this, there are so many sort of grey areas and sort of scenarios that most of organisations don't take into consideration. So elements such as this are sort of questions we expected. Yeah,
indeed, yeah. And I just think always err on the side of caution, just in case. And to expect your drivers to pick a device up and start, tapping it and doing whatever they do with this device when they're driving, I think that is primarily not duty of care. I think we're impacting on their ability to drive a vehicle in a safe manner in a big way. And we know that crashes in the US, it's prolific and it's just colossal is the problem that mobile phones are creating for the whole of the global, really, to be frank with you. Same in Australia, South Africa, it's everywhere. Not just here. So I would err on the side of caution. If you want an absolute dynamite, yes, 100% sealed, I would potentially ring that solicitor and say, what do you think about this? Are we okay to use it or are we not? And I think the answer will be, you're not allowed to be using that, if that helps.
No, thank you. I'll say one of the things to potentially also consider is reviewing some of the operating functionality of devices and equipment that's being used. What you may find is that you can switch the ability to activate audio on some devices. So it could be that you communicate and send a message through to a member of staff about a job or location change, rather than them having to pull over and engage and interact with the phone. It could be that it just verbally kicks out that audio for them to be aware.
Yeah, absolutely, Aden. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's it in terms of questions. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that's attended today. As I said before, we'll pull a load of information together. I'll also ask Paul to provide me a bit more content so I can give you a bit more detail about some of the solutions and services that Paul was able to provide. But thank you for your time, everyone, today. It's been fantastic, and we will be hosting another webinar in the very near future.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.